You wake in the dark with the sheets soaked through and no idea what your own body has just done. Your top is damp from the collar to the waist. The bedroom sits cool, the window cracked open the way you always leave it. The clock reads a little past 3, and the air is unchanged since you fell asleep. Nothing in the room has moved, and yet something inside you has run a full emergency to completion while you lay there unconscious, then finished and left only the evidence behind on the sheets. Across the face and the chest, your skin flushed. Sweat broke from the forehead down to the breastbone. Your heart climbed and settled again. All of it triggered by a change in your core temperature, smaller than the space between two fine lines on a thermometer. A year before, that same tiny change would have passed through your body and produced nothing at all. No flush, no sweat, no waking. It would have gone by completely unnoticed, the way it always had. Something in your head had quietly changed the rules. Deep in the brain, in a region called the hypothalamus, sits the place that keeps the body's temperature steady. And it works like a thermostat with a tolerance built into it. Instead of a single fixed number, it holds a small band it will allow before it acts. That band had narrowed. The reason it narrowed, the thing that reached in and closed it, and why the body now treats a sliver of a degree as a crisis worth waking you for, is what all of this is about. Let me start with the band itself, because almost nobody knows it exists. A body does not hold one exact temperature, it holds a range. Picture a thermostat on the wall set to a comfortable warmth, but told to do nothing until the room drifts a certain distance off the mark. Inside that allowed distance, the furnace and the cooling both stay quiet. The room can wander a little warm, a little cool, and the machine simply watches and waits. Only when the wandering crosses the edge of that allowed distance does anything switch on. Your hypothalamus runs the body on exactly that principle. There is a range of core temperatures it will tolerate without doing a single thing to correct them. Physiologists who study this give the range a name. They call it the thermo-neutral zone. In a woman before menopause, it spans somewhere around 0.4 degrees, and that small number is the quiet hero of this whole story. Above the top edge of that zone, the body starts cooling. Blood vessels near the skin open wide to dump heat. Sweat glands release water to carry heat away as it evaporates, and the heart speeds up to move the warmed blood outward toward the surface. Below the bottom edge, the opposite happens. The vessels clamp down to hold heat in, and the muscles begin to shiver to manufacture more of it. Between those two edges lies the calm middle where nothing fires. Consider how strange and how sensible that design is at the same time. A body that corrected every last flicker of temperature would spend its whole energy budget chasing noise, firing the furnace and the cooling against every meal and every stare. The tolerance band is what buys you peace. It is the brain's decision not to sweat the small stuff, made literal, written into the wiring as an actual width of degrees. For most of your life, that width is so generous you forget the whole control loop is even there. You only meet it when it shrinks. 0.4 degrees of quiet in the middle. That is the whole margin. And here is the part that matters, the part that makes everything else make sense. Your core temperature is never actually still. It rises a little after you eat, as digestion burns fuel. It drifts on a daily cycle, high in the late afternoon, low in the depths of the night. It lifts when you move, and it climbs a touch when a strong emotion moves through you. Those small movements happen all day and all night in every person alive, yours included, at this very stage of your life. The width of that tolerance band is the only reason you have never noticed a single one of them. The band is wide enough to swallow the ordinary bobbing of your own temperature whole. So a fair question sits underneath all of this. What decides how wide that band is? Because if the band can be 0.4 degrees, then something set it to that width. And if something set it, then something could set it somewhere else. Something could close it. Look to a small cluster of nerve cells with an odd name and a surprising amount of power over your comfort. Deep in the hypothalamus, in a structure called the arcuate nucleus, sits a group of neurons known by 3 chemicals they carry inside them: kisspeptin, neurokinin, B, and dynorphin. Take the front of each of those 3 chemical names and you get the nickname the field actually uses, because it is far easier to say than the full mouthful every time. The KNDy neurons. Think of them as the hand that sets the width of the tolerance band. They send their signals forward to the part of the hypothalamus that actually runs the heating and the cooling, and the loudness of their signaling decides how much drift the thermostat will forgive before it acts. Louder signaling pulls the two edges inward, narrowing the band. Quieter signaling lets the edges relax outward, widening it. That is the dial, and those neurons are the hand resting on it. For decades of a woman's life, one hormone keeps a steady, calming hand of its own over the whole arrangement. Estrogen settles onto those KNDy neurons and holds them down. It binds to a docking point on the surface of the cell, a receptor shaped and tuned specifically to receive it, and that binding keeps the neurons calm and their signaling low. Low signaling means a wide tolerance band. A wide band means all that ordinary temperature bobbing stays completely invisible. For year after year, the estrogen is present, the neurons are held quiet, the band stays generous, and you move through your days never once feeling your own thermostat work inside you. That is the healthy arrangement, running silently, exactly as it was built to run. That docking point has a name worth knowing because a great deal turns on it. It is one particular flavor of estrogen receptor, the alpha type, and it is the specific lock that this whole calming arrangement depends on. As long as estrogen is around to fill that lock, the neurons stay suppressed. The suppression is a physical binding event, a molecule landing in a slot, repeated across millions of cells, holding a dial steady. Take the molecule away, and the slot sits empty, and an empty slot is a released neuron. Then the estrogen begins to leave. As menopause approaches, the hormone that had been sitting on those neurons and keeping them still starts to fade from the blood. The hand lifts off the dial, free from the suppression they had lived under for a lifetime. The KNDy neurons begin to fire faster, and their signaling grows louder. One of those three chemicals in particular, the neurokinin B, carries the change downstream to the cooling machinery. As its signal rises, the tolerance band starts to close. 0.4 of a degree begins shrinking toward nothing. But how does a chemical released by one cluster of neurons actually move the edge of a temperature band? Follow the signal. The KNDy neurons do not run the cooling machinery themselves. They send a projection forward to the part of the hypothalamus that does, the preoptic region, the actual control desk for heating and cooling. The neurokinin B is the message they send down that wire. When it arrives loud and often, it shifts the control desk's own setting, dragging the cooling threshold downward until it sits almost on top of your resting temperature. The band closes for a concrete reason. A specific message, sent from a specific place to a specific desk, tells the desk to react to less. Look into the aging hypothalamus, and these very neurons stand visibly enlarged in women past menopause, swollen with exactly the activity this picture predicts, as Rance traced through patient study of human brain tissue under the microscope. The cells that had been held quiet for decades were now plainly working overtime, and you could see the evidence of it right there in the tissue. The dial had not just moved. You could look at the hand that moved it. Now hold the two pieces together, because this is where the whole thing turns. Meanwhile, the temperature bobbing never stopped. It was always there, all day, all night, exactly as before. What changed is the band that used to hide it. As that band narrows toward zero, a rise of 1/10 of a degree that used to fall comfortably inside the tolerance now lands past the upper edge instead. And the moment it lands past the edge, the hypothalamus does the only thing it knows how to do with a temperature reading above the line. It launches a full cooling emergency. That is the hot flash. It is the body's ordinary cooling response, the exact same one it would run if you were genuinely overheating on a summer afternoon. Run at full strength for a change in temperature so small, it should have meant nothing whatsoever. The response itself is completely normal. The trigger threshold is the only thing that moved. Friedman, measuring core temperature and skin cooling in women during actual flashes as they happened, demonstrated that a real rise in core temperature comes just before the flash, and that the tolerance band in women who flash is dramatically narrower than in women who do not. He put a hard number on the closing of the band and showed the flash begins with a genuine temperature rise the woman never feels, as heat until the cooling response announces it. The thing had been measurable all along, sitting in the data waiting only to be measured. By now you understand what set the trap and why it springs. But the question turns from what narrowed the band towards something you've been feeling for a while, without a name to hang on it. Why do the flashes seem to strike out of nowhere, at no particular time, for no particular reason at all. People reach for the word random. It feels random. It arrives at a supermarket checkout, in the middle of a meeting, in the dead center of the night, with nothing obvious anywhere to explain it. But look at what you already know, and the randomness begins to dissolve into something far more orderly. Your temperature is bobbing constantly, and every separate source of that bobbing is its own small push. A meal warms you slightly as the work of digestion runs. A wave of stress sends a pulse of heat through you. A few minutes of movement adds a little. The daily temperature rhythm carries you up and down on its own fixed schedule, regardless of anything you do. Each of these, taken on its own, is tiny. For decades, not one of them mattered, because the band was always wide enough to hold every one of them at once. But the band is a razor now, and all of those small independent pushes, the meal and the stress and the movement and the daily rhythm, are still happening, still shoving your temperature the identical small distances they always did. Any one of them, at any moment, can be the single push that carries you the last sliver of a degree past the edge. They do not coordinate with each other. They do not announce themselves in advance. They simply keep happening, the way they always have, only now each one is a loaded trigger with a hair-thin pull. That is why it feels random. Many quiet pushes, one narrow threshold, and no way at all to see in advance which push will be the one that tips you over. Think about what that means for the shape of your day. The afternoon, when your daily rhythm carries your temperature to its natural high, becomes a stretch where the smallest extra push clears the edge easily. A warm room does it. A hot drink does it. A flush of feeling does it. None of these were ever triggers before because the band absorbed them without a sound. They are triggers now for one reason only. The edge came to meet them. The world did not get hotter around you. Your tolerance for it shrank. Some of those pushes carry a signature you may recognize from the rest of your body's stress machinery. When you feel a jolt of fear or pressure, the body's alarm branch fires and, among everything else it does, it generates a small amount of heat as a side effect of switching the body to high alert. That thermogenic bump was always harmless before. Against the razor, it becomes one more reliable way across the edge, which is exactly why a flash so often arrives fused to a moment of stress. The stress supplied the last tenth of a degree, the final push across the edge. It is not only sudden stress that does this. A body that runs with its alarm branch turned up as a constant background, the way it does under long strain, sits with a slightly higher baseline warmth all the time. That does something quieter and worse than causing a flash outright. It parks your resting temperature a little closer to the upper edge of the razor, so a smaller push is now enough to cross it. The sustained tension shortens the distance to the trigger, leaving less and less room between an ordinary day and an emergency. The night sweats come from the same picture, with one extra turn that makes them worse. In the deep of the night, your core temperature sinks to the very lowest point of its daily cycle, a natural trough that every person passes through, flashes or not. The ordinary oscillations riding around that trough, once entirely harmless, now cross the narrowed edge in the dark, and the cooling emergency runs while you sleep. Worse still, the hours of poor sleep raise a stress hormone that carries its own thermogenic warmth, and it arrives at the very hour the trough already sits near the narrowed threshold. Two small warmings, stacked at the worst possible moment, and because the band is now so thin, the body can overshoot the bottom edge as easily as the top, so a single night can hold both a drenching sweat and a spell of cold. Two opposite emergencies, minutes apart, from a control system with no quiet middle left to rest in. Well, that is the why of it. Now watch the thing itself, from the inside, second by second. The push arrives. Your core temperature crosses the upper edge of the razor-thin band. The hypothalamus reads a body that is too hot and commits in a single instant to shedding heat as fast as biology will let it. First, the blood vessels near the skin swing wide open. Warm blood from the core floods out to the surface of the face, the neck, the chest, and the skin turns red and hot to the touch. That is the flush. It is your radiator, thrown open at full bore to hurl heat out through the skin into the air. Then the sweat. Glands across the forehead, the upper lip, the back of the neck, and the chest release water onto the skin because evaporating water carries a large amount of heat away with it as it lifts off. This is the evaporative cooling that dries a wet road under the sun, running deliberately on your own skin, turned on by the brain on purpose. and the heart lifts 7 to 15 beats a minute to move the heated blood outward faster and keep the whole cooling operation fully supplied. The pounding you feel is pump speed. There is a reason the whole thing feels like it comes from nowhere and everywhere at once. Every one of these actions, the vessels opening, the glands releasing, the heart lifting, is run by one fast branch of the nervous system, the one built for emergencies, firing all its outputs together in a single coordinated burst. That is why a flash switches on whole rather than building gradually like a fever. The way an alarm system trips every sensor at the instant it arms. The suddenness you feel is the signature of a system that has only one speed, and that speed is all at once. Building over a minute or two, the wave peaks and fades. Most flashes run their entire course in 1 to 5 minutes from first heat to last. Then comes the part that almost no one ever connects to the rest of it. You get cold. You may even shiver, because the cooling response launched at full strength for a threat that was never truly there overshoots the mark. It dumps far more heat than the tiny original rise ever called for, and your core temperature sails straight down past the bottom edge of that same narrow band. And the temperature below the lower edge means one single thing to the hypothalamus: warm up. So now it reverses hard and reaches for heat, and you feel the chill on the far side of the flush. The thermostat is hunting for a resting point inside a band far too thin to hold one. It overshoots going down, overshoots coming back up, and the after chill is the sound of it searching for a middle that no longer exists. And the thinner the band, the wilder each swing, because a control loop given almost no room to aim in is forced into large corrections, then has to correct the correction. A wide band forgives small drift, a thin one turns every response into an overreaction. Picture the control loop trying to settle a room whose allowed band has been squeezed down to a hair. It reads too warm, blasts the cooling, sails past comfortable into cold, reads too cold, blasts the heat, sails back past comfortable into warm. A wide band would have let it stop in the middle. A hair-thin band gives it nowhere to stop, so it swings, and each swing is something you feel in your own skin. So the flash and the chill are one single overcorrection seen from both of its ends. And then there is one more layer, and it answers a puzzle the numbers raise entirely on their own. If a low level of estrogen narrows the band, then the years after menopause, when the estrogen sits low and stays low, ought by rights to be the very worst of all. But for most women, they are not. The flashes rage during the transition and then, for many, ease off in the years that follow, even as the estrogen stays firmly down. Why would the symptom fade while its supposed cause sits there unchanged? Well, because those neurons respond to change more than to level. It is the withdrawal that provokes them, the falling itself. The steady low reading, once reached, provokes far less. During the transition into menopause, the estrogen does not glide smoothly downward. It swings, drops, rebounds, drops again, and every single fall is a fresh removal of the hand from the dial. That instability, that repeated yanking away, is what drives the KNDy neurons hardest, and that is precisely when the flashes are most fierce and most frequent. Later, once the hormone has finished its long fall and settles at a low but steady level, the neurons begin, slowly, to adapt to the new quiet around them. The band recovers some of its lost width. Deprived of the hormone for long enough, the cells appear to reset their own baseline, dialing their resting output back down towards something the thermoregulatory desk can once again tolerate. The system slowly relearns a wider quiet. The flashes soften, the neurons answered the movement of the number, and the steady low that followed left them progressively calmer. Though that cannot be the whole account, and honesty demands saying so. Some people go on flashing for 10 years or more, long after the hormone has gone still, long after the neurons should have settled. Why do a few of these bands never find their new quiet? Nobody fully knows yet. The rate of withdrawal seems to matter, and so does something about the individual wiring that the research has not yet pinned down. What is solid is the pathway itself. What varies between one person and the next is how stubbornly the band refuses to widen again once the falling stops. Give women a drug that blocks the very receptor the KNDy signal reaches for, as Prague did in testing this pathway as directly as it can be tested, and the flashes fall away sharply within days. Picture the receptor as the doorway the message has to pass through to reach the control desk. The overactive neurons are still shouting, but the drug quietly fills the doorway, and a message that cannot arrive cannot move the threshold. The neurons go on firing into a door that no longer opens, and the band stopped closing. That is the whole logic of it, and it is why the effect shows up in days rather than months. The approach leaves the neurons firing and the hormone gone, and works purely by intercepting one signal at the one place it lands, block the overactive signal at its landing point, and the emergencies quiet down almost at once. Carpenter, following a refined version of that same blocker through large clinical trials, confirmed that shutting down that one receptor cuts both the number and the severity of the flashes, and the treatment reached approval on the strength of that result. The pathway held up under a direct, deliberate test, which is close to the strongest thing you can ever say about a proposed mechanism in biology. You did not just describe it, you reached in, switched it off, and watched the symptom go. There is one more turn here, and it will surprise the men listening who assumed none of this could possibly touch them. Men make estrogen too, in small amounts, and some of it is manufactured right there inside the hypothalamus by converting testosterone on the spot, in place, where it is needed. That locally made estrogen settles onto the very same KNDy neurons and keeps them quiet by the very same mechanism. Take a man whose prostate cancer treatment strips his testosterone away deliberately as part of the therapy. The local supply for that on-the-spot conversion vanishes along with it. The neurons lose their suppression, the tolerance band narrows toward zero, and roughly 4 out of 5 of those men get hot flashes that are, in every physical detail, the identical event. The same neurons, the same narrowed band, the same cooling emergency fired for a change that once meant nothing. A different hormone pulled away, and the very machine that runs your flash responds in the very same way in them. Which tells you something the word menopause quietly hides. The flash was really about a specific hand coming off a specific dial, whichever hormone happened to be resting there. This is the deep shape of the whole thing, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. A hot flash is a control system doing precisely what it was built to do. Cooling a body it has been told is too hot, obedient and fast, and correct in every step but one. The one error is upstream, in a band that closed. Everything downstream of that closed band is your thermostat working perfectly, on bad information. And that is why blocking the wrong message at the receptor calms it so cleanly. You are correcting the information a working machine is running on. You are standing at the checkout when the next one comes. The heat climbs from your chest to your face in about 4 seconds. The skin flushes. The sweat breaks at your hairline. Your heart jumps and hammers against your ribs. 90 seconds later it is over. The line has barely moved, and nothing in the store has changed at all. Inside your hypothalamus, the KNDy neurons that estrogen held quiet for decades have lost that grip as the hormone withdrew. Their firing has climbed. Neurokinin B has narrowed the tolerance band from around 0.4 of a degree toward nothing. A rise in your core temperature smaller than 1/10 of a degree, a rise the thermostat would have ignored without a flicker a year earlier, has crossed the upper edge. The hypothalamus has launched a full cooling emergency for a temperature change the body used to absorb in silence. The flush was blood rushing to the skin to shed heat. The sweat was the evaporative cooling system switching on. The pounding heart was the output rising to move the shifted blood. The hot flash had a cause the whole time. The thermostat narrowed. The fluctuations were always there. The body started reacting to changes it used to ignore because the tolerance window that made them invisible had closed.